Hi, y'all. Welcome, Moon Griffon Show. Great to have you with us as we rock and roll. It is already hump day. Hard to believe. I'm Brandon. Brandon comes back from a big old vacation, a lot of fun, and Brandon goes back and goes, my God, it's Wednesday. It's like I never left.
I know, man. It seems like it was ages ago.
The first day is different.
Yeah.
By the second day, you're back in the groove, and the third day, it's like you never went.
I know.
I mean, you've never gone anywhere, even though you did.
Yeah.
And by the way, I'll feel that about mid-July.
yeah, exactly.
All right, folks, 844-766-6607. Hickson has a hotline, a lot to talk about today. I mean, a ton. But we get an opportunity to talk to the Speaker of the House. Taylor Barras joins us, Speaker of the House of the Legislature after the session. He was tied up a lot yesterday, but we do have him for the hour. We're going to get a chance to visit with him. Taylor, first of all, good morning.
Good morning, Moon. Thank you for having me.
Well, no problem. Now, I'm going to tell you something you hadn't read in the paper. Thank you. Thank you for the leadership. You ain't seen that in the paper. That didn't come out the governor's mouth, by the way.
That is true. That's a new one.
No, that's what I'm saying. But thank you, because I'm looking at a state with a GDP. Our economy is contracting really quick, and the GDP is declining. And that's what they measure economies on. And the out-migration and the jobs are leaving. We've seen companies leave. And the oil and gas industry can't get up off the ground from the lawsuits. And so we really have to watch how much government spends. And even though y'all had the compromised budget, y'all's budget was compromised. Y'all were the ones trying to compromise some. They didn't want to compromise any. So I want to say on the air, thank you for your leadership, because it was real leadership on your house. And let me tell you something. Leadership doesn't go with the way the river flows. Leadership goes in the right direction. It doesn't go on a one-way street when the one-way street's going the other way. And so I want to say thank you. And I really mean it sincerely. I think y'all did a heck of a job. Y'all tried to compromise. I'm not for any new taxes, but y'all tried to even give him new taxes. And the governor and his side, they keep saying, no, we want it all. Your comment.
That has been the storyline since we arrived with the new administration in 2016. Excuse me. We have worked diligently toward the numbers and the factual numbers and the reality that we deal with as members cast their votes with the economy that surrounds us in Louisiana. I mean, it is easy while you're in the Capitol to forget what's outside those walls, but when you go home on weekends and you continue to get the feedback, and of course, you know, as a banker sitting in the middle of the oil patch in South Louisiana, it does not take long for me to be quickly reminded of how sluggish and slow our economy still is. That may not be the case in every part of the state, but in a vast majority of it, it has filtered over. And you mentioned, you know, our GDP, the sluggishness of it for 2 years running. Add to that.
Taylor, can I stop you? It's not the sluggishness. It's contracting. That's not a slugging. That's not even going. That's going backwards. Now, I know you, but you're being honest because you are a banker. You're in the real world, and you talk to people in businesses on a daily basis. You got a real good insight of what's going on compared to what the governor does, I can promise you.
And then the majority of these are small to medium-sized businesses. Sure. These are not the big guys. These are the ones that these taxes that keep getting suggested are the ones that are going to get hurt by it. And in addition to that, in Acadiana, payroll contraction across Louisiana, total payroll went down in the last report that was released for the first quarter. Mm-hmm. Lafayette was the leader with $11 million missing out of payroll paid out in the Acadiana area. Mm-hmm. It is those realities when you get criticized. I can't believe y'all were deliberating over the sixth of a penny. Yeah. A sixth of a penny is $146 million. Yep. That's real money to a lot of those businesses that are hurting. And that's the reality of, you can take it to the minute detail and call it a sixth of a penny. I'll flip it over and say, but that's $146 million.
Well, by the way, one other thing to add, that's on top of everything we're already paying, though, Taylor. That's on top of everything on paying. They say, well, you're only going to pay $100 or $50 more for a whole year on top of the thousands and thousands that people are paying. Some businesses are paying $100,000. I mean, the concept of what you have to have government money is a private sector that's doing very well. I don't understand why the left doesn't understand it. Nobody in the printed press understands it at all.
And a lot of the legislation that was suggested also attacked the very incentives and job creation incentive programs that are out there that help us grow that sector. And economic development is, two words that get overused.
By the way, I call them curse words. I call them curse words because people use them in the wrong. They use them in the wrong areas. Everything's economic development. That's
scratch through that and call it job creation.
Yep.
And look, the CGI announcement in Lafayette was a very positive.
Sure.
The kind of companies we're trying to attract to Louisiana, but it is documented that without those incentives, the very incentives that we were trying to shave and cut and reduce, are the things that got CGI to help make those decisions. That is how other states attract companies to their states.
By the way, to make your point, Smoothie King left and went to Texas and never got a penny. That was, quote, in the newspaper. We didn't get one incentive. This is what we needed to do for our company. And basically telling them, look, we're out of here. And I don't care what anybody says, our tax structure and what we do in the business is hurt. Taylor, take us through one of the things you could probably take us through better than anybody. They had a lot that went on Sunday. Was it Sunday night? Monday night. I mean, a lot that went on that nobody knows about. And I know you could take us through some things, bills jumping back. I read one article where they had to run a bill to the Senate committee, run it through the committee, run it through the Senate, to run it back to y'all. That kind of stuff is crazy. But can you take us through a little bit of what went on?
Sure, and I'll talk about the bills that were. I mean, there were 8 or 10 bills that we were still deliberating with on Monday afternoon and Monday evening. The two that, of course, were the highlights. Actually, 3. House Bill 1, which was the budget. House Bill 27 was Representative Harris's third of a penny bill.
Yep.
And then House Bill 12, which was never intended to be a sales tax bill, that got turned into a sales tax bill, and I'll talk about that one a little bit.
Okay.
But one that has kind of escaped a lot of the press. They've talked a little bit about it, but its major impact on what happened Monday afternoon is the vote on the earned income tax credit.
Yep.
That wasn't an object in the first special session. It was not talked about in the very first special session in 2016, an effort to double it, if you remember that. It's never come up again. It entered the picture under the guise of, if the Democrats were going to help support any portion of the penny, that they would need that to help with cover. As late as Monday morning, with Republican members visiting with the governor's office, and the governor himself telling those members, he didn't tell it to me, he told it to several of the members that shared it with me, that the earned income tax credit movement was really not on their radar. It was not something they had put in their consideration. It was out there, but I will tell you, on Monday evening, it became the roadblock and the logjam. Mm-hmm. We were told on many instances that the Senate would not send over either one of our revenue bills without the House taking a vote on the earned income tax credit. Representative Jackson, tried to recuse her conference committee. She also, took it to a vote. It eventually passed with 12 Republicans helping support pass it. But that was part of the logjam on Monday afternoon. Mm-hmm. That's kind of been left out of the discussion a lot. So I'll lay that one aside for now. I'll come back to it in a minute. But on the budget bill, and more importantly, the revenue bill, as you know, the Senate amended our House Bill 1, our budget bill, and they also amended heavily Representative Harris's bill. So, of course, when those came back to the House, we had to ordinarily reject those Senate amendments because we disagreed with a number of them. When you do that, we move into a conference committee, 3 members of the House, 3 members of the Senate, and spend the time negotiating the differences between those amendments. Mm-hmm. We sent to conference House Bill 1 at 1 o'clock Monday afternoon. We sent House Bill 27, the revenue bill, to conference at about 5:30 that afternoon. I give you those 2 times because as we deliberated through the conference committee, our staff put the differences on paper. We delivered the first draft of a conference committee report to the Senate at about 8 p.m., delivered a second draft of a conference committee report about 9:30 p.m. So everything that was in deliberation at 9:30 p.m. was on the Senate side to be debated.
Sure.
What came back to us was neither one of those. What came back to us was House Bill 12, Representative Leger's bill, which was a 53-vote bill that left the House, intended to set us up for internet sales tax collection in the future should the Supreme Court decide on a case in South Dakota. It would lay the groundwork for Louisiana to be set up to participate in that. When that got to the Senate, that turned into a half-penny sales tax bill, which has got all kind of germaneness problems and issues with it, but the Senate chose to run with it that way. We got that bill in the House after the Senate passed it at 11:15 p.m.
Oh, my God.
We took a vote on it at 11:33 p.m. because I have it on my computer when we took the vote.
Sure.
Now, that was on a half-penny bill at 11:33 that we received from the Senate at 11:15. So when
and by the way, let's go back. They had the bills by 1 o'clock. Is that correct? Earlier
correct.
That
well,
day.
Actually, that House Bill 12 that came over at 11:15, they have been having since last Wednesday. That's the little. They haven't moved.
No, that's the little game. Start over at 11:15. We got you now. That's that. They're playing gotchas out of the Senate, which I'm not surprised that the media and the press don't pick up on any of that. Don't pick up on any of that.
The conference committee reports were not returned. When we went ahead and heard HB 12 and it failed on the House side, the Senate was apparently then willing to have two of their conferees sign Representative Harris's conference committee report. He came back with that signed conference committee report at 11:45, and we voted on that at 11:15. At 11:55, it failed. But my point being is when Senate leadership and senators say the House jammed us and the House waited too long. Look, on one of the bills they had since last Wednesday, and they had conference committee reports at 8 and 9 o'clock. There was no jam by the House, and we just don't get to tell that story every session. It ends up that way. But when the bill that they thought was the most important, the half-a-cent sales tax bill, gets to my chamber at 11:15, I'm not sure that was a negotiation in good faith at the end of the day.
Well, I'm one of the only ones that say, the budget has been passed. The Senate portion of the budget has been passed about 10 years in a row. And nobody blames the Senate. They just think the Senate's awesome. And the House is the one showing leadership. It's very frustrating. I know it's been frustrating for you, but I'm glad you're able to get the truth out here. Taylor Barras, Speaker of the House, is with us. Be with us at the top of the hour. Thank you for explaining what went on. Some of the stuff that went on behind the scenes that the media and people like that are not reporting, that y'all sent stuff over there early. They had one bill since the Wednesday before they didn't talk about that. Only thing I saw was the governor made the comment specifically faulting you and called a total collapse of leadership. And I thought, there was no total collapse of leadership. I thought y'all led us in the right direction.
It is a frustration when you get to the last couple of days of the session and you're attempting to ascertain what votes are there on what documents. There's always deliberation, and that is truly the purpose of those conference committees that we set up for that reason, and required to come back to the body once the conference committees are complete and take another vote to accept the conference committee report. So it's not anything done in private or behind the scenes.
No.
The author is required to come back before the body, explain what the conference decided, and ask both bodies to confirm and concur in those conference committee reports. So it's the process. The problem is it's a deliberative process that needs to start early in the day. And I told both of the authors of my bills that by lunchtime and certainly by the middle of the afternoon, all of that needed to be the Senate, and that's into the Senate, and that's what we accomplished. So we had 4 or 5 hours to certainly hash out those differences. But when you don't get the bill that everybody seemed to be focused on, a bill that I think had a number of problems, and that's Representative Legger's HB 12.
Oh, that was a horrible.
When you get that at 11:15, that's what people of Louisiana. When the governor says repeatedly that the citizens of Louisiana deserve better, they deserve better than a 45-minute opportunity to determine where $500 million of revenue is coming from.
Yeah, and that came
disappointment for me.
But that came from their side. That came from the governor's side. It came from Walt Leger, who, by the way, they're still upset that you're the speaker and he's not. Let's just be blunt. And so they put Leger out there to run some of these bills, and they don't. The process, which may or may not be fair at times, let's just face the fact, that part's not fair. They should have did all that earlier. And like you said, the one bill they had since Wednesday. Is that the one you're talking about?
Both Representative Harris's bill and Representative Leger's bill were heard in the Senate Rev and Fisk Committee last Wednesday.
That was House Bill 27, House Bill 12. Both heard last Wednesday, which gave us Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday, 6 days to fix it, and they keep complaining, and they wait till the last second to run everything through, and that's not fair to Louisiana. That's the part that's not fair to the citizens. I think you just made that statement.
And confusing to the citizens, because that House Bill 12, if you read it on the computer, is to set up what an internet tax collection site would look like, defines what an internet dealer is, setting us up for the future of possibility of collecting internet sales tax, which could be a significant event for Louisiana. Mm-hmm. We were supportive of that bill. In fact, there were duplicate bills. Representative Franklin Fall had one just like it. We sent both of them over to the Senate in good faith. They took that one because it was a sales tax bill and piled onto it. What it did is change House Bill 12, which was a 53-vote bill in the House. When it returned, because 70. They were levying a tax as part of it, turned it into a 70-vote bill.
In other words,
those kinds of things are hard for the public to follow.
In other words, they fooled themselves somewhat. I mean, they made a fool out of themselves.
Loaded it up, that's for sure.
Yeah, by the way, there's a song about those people that did that. It's called "It's in the Yellow Pages, listed under fools." That was foolish if you can think about it. Taylor Barras, I'm a special guest. Taylor, one of the things I want you to talk about too a little bit, and I know we're going to have to take a break, so I'm going to have to cut you and come back. Y'all passed the budget. The governor vetoed it. Had he not passed the budget, had he not vetoed that budget, would it have made this a little bit simpler?
Oh man, that was what we pleaded and made every effort to appeal to him. That in fact, it's the budget he now has as of this special session. One that spent what was available in the budget that the REC allows us to spend, and that's $8.9 billion. Mm-hmm. That is not what we're currently spending in this budget year. That is about $9.4 billion, and we recognize that. So we said all along, let's pass that one. We'll fill in with a supplemental appropriations where we would spend the additional money that's raised.
I'll tell you, hold your thought, because I got to take a break. We'll come back to that. Taylor Barras, my special guest. We'll be right back. Hi, hello. Welcome back. Moon Griffon Show. Great to have you with us. 844-766-6607. Hickson has that hotline. Just remember I told you that, Mr. Como, because then I can tell you the rest of the story. And you can say, wow, I remember when you told me that.
Yeah.
It was after my vacation.
Yeah.
All right, speaking of house, Taylor Barras, my special guest. And once again, thanks, Taylor, for all y'all have done. Talking about the budget process and the things you went through. And I even pulled that 4 minutes out that you talked about how the process went because it's never been explained, so I can play it over and over again for people. Because I think people need to hear what you're saying. They're not listening in the media. And the governor's not listening either. But, one of the things you talked about today, and I was so glad you did, and I told Brandon I got excited about it because you talked about being a banker, and you're in a rural area, but you're around the Lafayette area, and you see what's happened in our economy. And you understand, I can't keep bombing the people who are paying all the taxes. And you understand that, and I think that's what we need more of.
Absolutely. And I know that is the case with a lot of members, both in the House and the Senate. I mean, we have, large metropolitan areas that have multiple representatives. But when you look across my body, anytime there's a rural issue in the House, it's a big issue. It affects, 60 or 70 of those 105 members real quickly, whether it's rural water, drainage, whatever the case may be. It is important. And it is those small businesses that depend on some of these incentives that the state has offered over the years to help them in job creation and those kinds of things. I did a little work during the first special of this year and again in the regular around the Louisiana spending calculation. We have built into the Constitution an expenditure cap that the administration is required to calculate every January, and then we are required to operate under that cap. We're also required to only spend what the Revenue Estimating Conference recognizes, so you do have a double catch there. The difference is, on top of what the REC has recognized, certainly when an executive budget is prepared every year, that REC estimate does not stop departments from creating a wish list, and they can keep creating as long as they don't hit the expenditure cap. So, my good friend Brett Guyman and I, and now Parish President Robideau, had worked on this several years back. Back in 2013, the Constitution also allows us, at any point in the legislature with a 2/3 vote, to manually lower the spending cap, because it'll keep creeping up on the calculation that's currently used. So we did that back in 2013. In this regular session, I ran the bill and did it again. We reduced our spending cap from $14 billion to under $13 billion, reduced it about $1.4 billion this regular session. In addition to that, in the first special, I had authored legislation to go into the Constitution and change the formula on which we calculate it. It's been built on a percentage of personal income growth, which is a number that includes government payments, and it escalates the growth. Our expenditure cap has grown 3 or 4% every year, but here's the kicker, Moon. Our revenue has grown at 1% or less.
Yeah.
There is your fiscal cliff created every year. When expenditures can clip at 3 or 4% and revenue grows at 1 or less, you have a fiscal cliff every 12 months.
It's one of the things that I've been preaching from here, Taylor, and I don't know if you heard me at all. Our economy grows half of what government grows at best. That's going to not only be a cliff, that's going to be a disaster. And exactly. I don't care what anybody says. The engine that drives this train is private sector businesses and people working. Everything that works, nothing wrong. Look, I know we need government. I'm not anti-tax. I'm not anti-government. You're not either. I noticed they labeled somebody the other day, Alan Seabaugh, anti-tax. He's not. We're anti-gigantic taxes, and we like to be responsible for the things that we have coming in. And I think that's what you're trying to say. Look, you passed a budget, and the governor vetoed it. You passed another budget in this session. I guess he's going to veto it because you did pass a budget, if I recall.
Well, and even the one that sits on his desk today is, and I'll quickly acknowledge, it's $500 million below what we're spending in our current year, which is what my body, and I know the conservatives in the House, have been working. That is a real number that look, there's no one in the legislature, and I'm going to say that of the House and the Senate, that wants to see any nursing home resident or any disabled child or any top student to not. We're going to give it our best to make sure we fund that.
Sure.
Look, I have an up close and personal view of what Lafayette General Medical Center has done with UMC in Lafayette. It is probably one of the best examples of how a private partnership can work and work well. They have done a tremendous job with UMC. Their contract with the state is part of what we're working toward getting fully funded, and it's a critical part. They took over our state employees. It was a great move for Acadiana, and it was certainly a great move for healthcare in Louisiana. We acknowledge that, which is why I'm going to continue to work to do what we can to get that $500 million number back to at least what departments and agencies are spending this year. Beyond what they're spending this year becomes a wish list. And, the commissioner and the governor talk about another $260 million of mandated costs that are upon the state. Well, those mandated costs sometimes may need to be assumed by departments. Look, I run the House of Representatives. I could call my employees' expectation of a 4% raise every year a mandate. But I didn't give raises 2 years ago. This year we're doing it selectively, and everyone is not getting 4%. So there are ways that you can absorb and be more efficient. And look, one of the frustrations for us has been just about every efficiency or reform that we have suggested in the ways of spending. My spending cap example, I made a request in the second special, the one we just finished, to include spending cap into the governor's call. He included a statement about spending cap, but it did not allow me to run the constitutional amendment that I wanted to. It only referenced one section of that law, which was the part that I had done in the regular session. So, again, a semi way to block the ability to lower that spending cap. We have done Medicaid eligibility reform ideas. Those were either vetoed or failed.
Sure.
One bill that was vetoed, a simple bill that would require the Division of Administration to report to the Joint Budget Committee quarterly vacant positions what the dollar amount of those vacant positions are, and how many of them have been vacant for more than 6 months. That seems like a very basic request.
Pretty simple.
It was vetoed. It was vetoed by the governor.
Was that the one?
The House and the Senate.
Was that the one that I know there was a bill he vetoed that would allow y'all to look at budgets in general to get the same numbers that they get, so you can kind of look at it as you're building a budget to say, hey, you know what, we could cut here, we could do something different here. Was that the bill, or was that another bill that he vetoed?
That was another one. That one was vetoed as well.
But the bill was vetoed that you could help him make some cuts and some changes that need to be made. He vetoes all the good government bills. I mean, let's face it, that's lack of leadership in my book. I'm not saying you're saying that. I'm saying that. That's lack of leadership. That ought to be something he is saying, hey, y'all help us do this. Y'all send the bill. I think it got a lot of approval from both sides, and then he vetoes.
Absolutely. And the frustration for us is when you're asking businesses and individuals to pay more taxes, because we share that sales tax is being debated now, almost split in half. Businesses and individuals share the cost of that sales tax.
Sure.
But when you're asking them to do that permanently or for another 6 or 8 years, it is these kinds of efficiencies that we'd like to go back and say, we're asking you for more, but we also do check the eligibility of Medicaid people, so we're not putting people on that are not qualified. We'd like to change the formula in the Constitution to keep the spending cap at a reasonable level. It's those kinds of things that we need to be able to reinforce to the public, that we're being as efficient as we can in government. Unfortunately, this administration does not like any of those.
But the problem is, I see in the press, they keep saying y'all don't compromise. I think y'all went far beyond to compromise, even with taxes, with this governor. The problem is, and I'll let you talk about this when we come back, they have the attitude, we get all we want, or we don't want nothing. And I really think that's the problem here, but let's address that when we come back. One more segment. Speaker of the House, Taylor Barras. And I do want to address a little bit on the Medicaid that you touched upon, and then I'll let you go. Speaker of the House, Taylor Barras, with us for the full hour. Thank you, by the way, Speaker. Thanks for what you've done, and thanks for being part of the program today. All right, we'll take a break. Be right back. We're not telling that story.
The listeners will thank us for not telling that story on the air.
I mean,
it's enough when you tell people about you in the pink Speedo, but
844-766-6607. Hickson Has It hotline. On the Hickson Has It hotline, we have Speaker of the House, Taylor Barras. Once again, Taylor, thanks for your work, and number two, thanks for being part of the program. A couple quick things, and you may want to cover something else in about the 10 minutes we have left. I feel like that y'all have compromised, and y'all even came up with a $400 million tax increase, to offset some of the stuff that was going on. Yet the non-compromising has been coming from the governor or co-governors and the people on the left and a few Republicans. They're non-compromising. Y'all have actually given. But it seems to me, and tell me if I'm wrong, if they don't get it all, they don't care. They want it all. And am I wrong by saying that?
And it is a theme we have lived for 2.5 years or more now. And I know you remember the debate back in the first special session of 2017, projecting possibly a mid-year deficit. The governor made the suggestion that we pull money out of the rainy day fund in that special session. We were still in the midst of seeing the economy start to get some movement back forward. The conservatives in the House in particular continue to suggest that we take $50 million out of the rainy day rather than the $220 that was the balance. So we went back and forth with that. It was $220 or nothing. We went up to $75. The governor wanted $220. We went up to $100. The governor wanted $220.
Yep.
At the 11th hour, we caved and gave in at $199.
Yep.
Only to find out 6 months later, when we closed the books, we have a $150 million surplus, and they're screaming that the state's doing better and the economy is great and all this. And at the very first REC meeting, I said, let's not forget that 199 of that, a good 100 of it for sure, is money that we borrowed from the rainy day fund. So, I mean, that negotiation, even when we started in this first special, the shortfall according to the REC was $994 million. I can't tell you how many times we sent members up into the governor's office that it's $994 or nothing. I want $994 in revenue or nothing. it does not allow for any movement, and we got to that same situation here.
But let me stop you real quick. On the 994, he didn't even want to count the 300+ million because it hadn't been recognized from the Trump tax cut. You knew it was coming.
Correct.
I knew it was coming. He knew it was coming, but didn't want to recognize it. And that's what I think the scheme of this thing is. If I can get more money than I need and they recognize more money, I think the narrative for next year, and it's an election year, let's face the facts, is look what the governor's done. He took $2 billion deficit and turned it to a $400 million surplus, when in all fairness, we didn't even, in my opinion, have a $2 billion deficit. That's my opinion, Taylor. That's the spin they want to make on all this. And that's why I think the games are being played.
Absolutely, and even on the federal dollars, I was the chairman of REC. It was my last REC meeting to chair because we rotate every year, and it was that meeting that I put it on the agenda to recognize the money. Had I not been the chair, depending on who would have been the chair at the time, that may not have been recognized. We would have gone into that negotiation without that money being recognized, and everybody had agreed at the number at that point. So it's an all or nothing negotiation.
That's bad.
And in and of itself, there's a flaw in that, but it also wears down members as you continue to reach a frustration where we have Republicans willing to vote for revenue, but unless it's enough revenue, they turn away at it. And this example, I mean, you're going to turn away $400 million to cut $650 instead.
There was a whole.
Doesn't make sense out of that. But.
There was a whole article today in the Advocate, and by the way, the printed press has lost their minds. But a whole article in the Advocate about compromising. I think y'all have reached out way more than I would have. Now, I'm not a representative. I'm not sitting in your position, so I can say that. But y'all have reached out. Y'all have reached out a lot of times when I wanted to say, Taylor, don't do that. But y'all have reached out, and that's what makes me mad is when they write the House Republican, a few people in the House, a few people messed it up. And the bottom line is the few people they're talking about have actually you and Harris and Cameron and Blake and some of those guys. Y'all been the guys that actually have been the heroes in this. Seaball, y'all have actually been leaders. Y'all actually fighting for something. They're fighting just to take money out of an economy that's, for lack of better words, in a depression almost.
Well, and when you get criticized of, that we have no compassion for poor people and no compassion for elderly, and we have a Republican taking the lead on the revenue measure that was the centerpiece of the session, is the head of the Republican delegation in the House. I mean,
that's right.
They can't say we're not at the table. And
Harris is getting blasted after the session, of course, for nothing, because he did what he did, but he was the one that gave out the money. And I said, Harris, don't do that, because they're going to take it and blow it up, and that's exactly what they did. You're right on that. You're 100% right on it. But somebody reading something in the Advocate and the Times-Picayune, they're going to get the half of the story that makes no sense. And that's what frustrates me.
And what I have always encouraged the House members to do is to be at the table, whether we like the negotiation or not.
Sure.
We put revenue on the table. We put reforms on the table. We put efficiency models on the table. We suggest lowering the spending cap. I mean, it's all of those things that I think are in fairness to the taxpayers outside of that Capitol building. But it's met with resistance every time we do it.
Yeah, not the compromise has definitely come from the Republican side. Now, whether I agree or disagree, like you just said, is not important. It has come from our side. There's been no compromise from the governor and the people on the left. They're just not. I'm going to change gears with you with the few minutes we have left. I looked at this GDP declining. It really started when we expanded Medicaid. And I want you to talk a little bit about it because they had a report from LSU that was leading our economic engine and creating 19,000 jobs and that's all a bunch of lies, made up story that you're going to get money from the federal government. Now, you're for Medicaid, you're for helping poor people, but there's a lot of problems with it, but it's direct correlation of us not having money for anything else. And it's a direct correlation of our economy tanking. And I want you to talk about it because y'all have had reforms to do something about it that he will not sign or he will veto.
And I will tell you, and there's so many numbers and statistics inside that Medicaid program, and I'm going to try and just, talk about a couple of them that I think jump out at us a lot. I looked up, it was a couple of weeks ago, the April 18 numbers. So they're the most recent numbers that we have on Medicaid participants in Louisiana. 1,615,000,000 residents of Louisiana are on Medicaid. Now, that includes children, that includes elderly, that includes folks in nursing homes and all that. That is over a fourth of the Louisiana population.
Sure.
We have 4 million people. We have 1.6 million of them on Medicaid. It's a staggering number for us, but there are certainly bigger states with bigger populations that have more. The alarming number in that, Moon, is 44% of our children are serviced by Medicaid. Mm-hmm. That's an alarming number to me.
Sure.
That gives you an idea of the level of poverty in our state. More the reason why we would want to look at the efficiencies building into that program to make sure that we're not leaving somebody off that deserves to be on. For someone that's maybe on that shouldn't be. And it's those kinds of staggering numbers that you continue to look at. Here's the rough part. Is 2020, 2021, depending on what the feds do, 10% or more of that becomes our responsibility. Through the expansion and through the Obamacare model, the feds have been covering every bit of that. We pick up 5% this year. We pick up more than that in a year or two from now. And that is going to be a staggering number for Louisiana when we take over our share of that.
We won't be able to afford that. There's just no way for us to maintain that.
More the reason, and I had this discussion with a couple of Democrats in my body, that we need to be careful what we're doing with revenue raising and efficiencies right now, because in 2 years, that's going to be staring us in the face.
Oh, yeah. 2 years, it'd be staring us in the face, and it'd be something that we can't handle. I mean, it makes no sense. Well, I'll say it again. Thank you, because I really believe the guys and the people they're talking about that were so-called the bad guys are really the good guys, and they've reversed it. So we appreciate your work, and hang in there, because I know they're coming. And by the way, we'll see you again in about a week, I'm sure, with another special session.
We'll be ready, and we'll be at the table. But thank you for having us, helping us share the message that we don't always get to tell through the mainstream press. And at the same time, to our residents, I think we need to remind them that this is not just a political battle. This is in the best interest of our people, particularly those that are receiving the services that we clearly understand are critical.
Sure.
So we want to make sure our residents know that this fight is for them, not for any of us.
Sure.
Although it looks like that when we're, at 11:59, fighting over the microphone.
I got to go. Thank you. I just love how you close it. It's 12 o'clock. We're done. Thank you. By the way, we got to take a break, too. We're done. Thanks, Taylor.